Now it's time to get down to business like adults. Problem is, neither the Bloc or the NDP have chosen to go that route.
Stop the presses, everybody. We've received information that gives us some hope. The NDP are starting to work against the Liberal government, and we have found evidence to prove it in the form of something called a motion of concurrence.
Let's take a look.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Kingston and the Islands.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to rise today to talk a little bit about what's going on in this House. I would like to provide some context as to why I think we're debating this particular motion today. And then I'll share my time with the member from Milton, who will provide his insight into perhaps a better insight into the actual substance of this report. But you know, I will start by saying that I really did appreciate that last comment by the member from Simcoe North about Bitcoin. I think that I really hope that he has the opportunity, and he doesn't have to go anywhere, and he can stay in this House and get up when I'm finished my speech to ask me a question about Bitcoin. I'd love to know more about his feelings on Bitcoin. The fact that the price has gone up, according to him, I didn't realize that this morning, but the price of Bitcoin, according to the member from Simcoe North, has gone up. So I'd love to hear more about that, and I'd love to hear more about the policies that the Conservatives have to offer Canadians in terms of Bitcoin and investing in Bitcoin. Perhaps this means that we will soon see the Leader of the Opposition buy another shawarma with Bitcoin. I mean, that would be a great video, and I think what better time than when Bitcoin goes up. So I would encourage the member from Simcoe North to stay in his seat, bear with having to listen to me for 9 more minutes, and then get up and let's talk about Bitcoin. Ask me a question about Bitcoin. Provide me with some of the great insight that I need to know about that. I'd love to engage in that discussion. But you know, Mr. Speaker, we have to really take the opportunity to understand why we're here right now in this position, why we're talking about this particular issue. And I'm not saying that it's not an important issue. I think that especially when we ask the anti-competitive agencies to engage in looking at certain practices, I think that's an extremely important thing. But let's just back up a little bit. About 4 weeks ago, when Conservatives started debating a privilege motion. And so for those that are watching, I know that the member who moved this motion likes to talk about the procedure and how things are happening and make sure that those that are watching are properly informed. So I'll do the same thing. The Conservatives moved a motion based on a ruling from your chair, Mr. Speaker. And as a result, we've been in Conservative filibustering for the last four and a half weeks. Filibustering on their own motion, I should add, because their motion is that we send this particular issue to the issue of privilege to committee, to Proc Committee. But yet they don't even want to vote on that. They've moved a motion to send this somewhere, but they absolutely refuse to do that. So what have they done in the process? They filibustered by putting up almost all, I believe at last count it was around 106 Conservatives to speak for 20 minutes. They moved an amendment which allowed some of them to even speak twice or 3 times. And then when that started to run out, they started to move some concurrence motions like the one that we're debating today. And then after that, they allowed that debate on a sub-amendment to collapse so that they could reset their speaking roster and start from scratch again to give everybody another 20-minute round.
Okay, so Mr. Gerretsen, and I know he's terrible to listen to. At least he's a bit more tolerable than hearing Freeland or Trudeau speak. However, he talked about something called a concurrence motion. So this is something that we need to talk about because we are now neck deep into parliamentary chess at this point. So for those that recall, and Mark Gerretsen touched on it, the Speaker of the House, Greg Fergus, ruled that the question of privilege that the Conservatives raised regarding the turning over of the unredacted documents to the RCMP regarding the STTC scandal was valid, and debate would continue, suspending all other government business until that debate finished. Well, the Conservatives said, yes, sirree, Bob, no problem with that. And they've done everything they could to make sure that that debate doesn't finish. So that's what Gerretsen is talking by filibustering. Is it filibustering? Absolutely, it's filibustering. That is what is going on, because now that the Conservatives have a hold on Parliament, they're not going to let it go. Not unless the Liberals hand over the documents.
Right. If the Liberals handed those documents over to the RCMP, the documents regarding the Green Slush Fund, all this would be over. But the fact that the Liberals would rather have the official opposition, the Conservatives, waste so much time. I think it's been, 4 sitting weeks by this point. So the fact that the Liberals would rather have the Conservatives waste that much time where the Liberals could be legislating, I think it tells us that there's something really bad in those documents that the Liberals don't want to see the light of day.
100%. Now, it's not just the Conservatives that have been essentially doing this, right? You'll have the NDP stand up and say, oh, well, the Conservatives are wasting all this time. Even the Bloc will kind of take a jab at them just because you have to. They're your competing parties. But the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So we've seen the Bloc introduce some concurrence motions. We've seen the Conservatives introduce some concurrence motions, and the NDP. Now, you're sitting there saying, okay, that's fine. You're saying concurrence motion like 50 times. What is a concurrence motion? Well, this is what it is.
For that, we're going to go back to the Green Book. So this is the 3rd edition of the House of Commons Procedure and Practice by Bosch and Gagnon. You'll often hear it referred to as the Green Book.
Or Bosch and Gagnon.
Yeah, that as well. I'm looking on page 1002. And it says, once the committee reports to the House, a minister may move a motion to concur in the report. The concurrence in the committee report constitutes an order from the House to bring a bill based on the recommendations of the committee.
So the other thing that a concurrence motion does, and it doesn't necessarily just have to be moved by a minister, it can be moved by any MP. Typically by the MP presenting the report, but any MP can actually move it. So, in layman's terms, what a concurrence motion is when committee has been studying something, they prepare a report. That's the whole point of things going into committee. So that will result in a report, and usually the committee brings the report back to the House and says, here's the report, off you go, and then nothing else really happens. However, if an MP says, you know what, I think we should debate this report and have a look at it to see if we all agree with it, they will introduce a concurrence motion. And what happens there is that motion then says, okay, everything stops in the House, including the question of privilege debate, might I add, and you are now debating this motion of concurrence regarding this report.
So this is actually in the standing orders, and on page 1354 of the Green Book, under debate, we see debate on concurrence in committee report. 2. A motion for the concurrence in a report from a standing or special committee shall receive not more than 3 hours of consideration, after which time, unless previously disposed of, the Speaker shall interrupt and put all questions necessary to dispose of the motion without further debate or amendment, provided that, if debate is adjourned or interrupted, A, the motion shall again be considered on a day designated by the government after consultation with the House leaders of the other parties, but in any case not later than the 10th sitting day after interruption. B, debate on the motion shall be resumed at the ordinary hour of daily adjournment on the day designated pursuant to paragraph A of this section and shall not be further interrupted or adjourned. And C, when no member rises to speak or after 3 hours of debate, whichever is earlier, the Speaker shall put all questions necessary to dispose of the motion, provided that, If a recorded division is requested on the motion considered on a day designated pursuant to paragraph A of the standing order, it shall be deferred to an appointed time on the next Wednesday, no later than the expiry of the time provided for government orders of that day. And then point 3 says, not more than one motion for the concurrence in a report from a standing or special committee may be moved on any sitting day. And that's all contained within standing order number 66.
So basically what that says is that for every concurrence motion that is raised, you have a total of 3 hours. Now, it can be interrupted at any point within that 3 hours by the speaker, at which point, assuming debate isn't completed, it can be rescheduled. But then they would finish that total 3 hour allotment of debate the next day. So if you only debated, for example, 2 hours the first day on that motion, then whenever that is rescheduled to resume debate, you would only have 1 hour remaining, and then that's it, that's all. It goes to a vote, and then that's the end of it. So if you have all kinds of concurrence motions being scheduled, like 2, 3, 4, 5, all of these are 3 hours of parliamentary time. That's a lot of time to be burning on debate. And it also gives the Conservatives a bit of a rest to prepare for more speakers to actually present on the SDTC scandal in the question of privilege. And that seems to be exactly what's going on here.
So after a concurrence motion is completed, the members of the House have to vote on whether or not to adopt the report. We had seen a comment on one of our videos this week asking, why are they doing votes when no government business is permitted in the House right now? And that was why, is they were voting at the conclusion of a concurrence motion.
For sure. And again, voting takes up more time. Voting
It
takes
sure
up
does.
about 30 minutes to an hour to actually call in a vote, depending on how it goes. So again, when you add in all of this extra time, it gets padded together. It's wasting a lot of time, and the Liberals can't get it back. Now, the interesting thing is the NDP are getting in on this.
So it's not just the Conservatives filibustering. What's happening is reports are being introduced to the House from various committees, and even the NDP is asking for them to be concurred upon.
So that means that the NDP are taking part and encouraging the filibustering going on, because they see the benefit of how bad the Liberals look because they can't move anything in the House. Despite the fact that, you know, there may be some legislation that the NDP has feigned support on, but they know full well that it is in their best interest right now, over and above this other legislation that, you know, maybe they can score 1 or 2 political points on. It is in far more their best interest to essentially chain the Liberals down so they can't do anything. Why is this important? It means, folks, that the NDP are actually siding more with the Bloc and the Conservatives at this point than the Liberals. Now, this doesn't mean an election is going to be called tomorrow or anything like that. However, this has been essentially our first inclination from the NDP that they are now actually and procedurally distancing themselves from the Liberal government. So this is actually really good news, folks. Really good news. But
It's a step in the right direction for sure.
Now, we're not done with Mark Gerretsen, because he's going to do some more whining, and then you'll be surprised what happens next.
And so that's the game that is being played in this House of Commons right now. That's the game when is referred earlier by a multi-million-dollar game that the Conservatives are playing. To the people that are watching, your tax dollars are going towards that. It's your tax dollars that are spending millions of dollars right now to function and to keep the House operating in order to appease their desire for a filibuster. A filibuster on an issue that, by the way, the Speaker has ruled on, the Speaker has given direction, that all of them, they're the only ones that speak. At times, they're the only ones that ask each other questions on the issue. And they're doing it for one reason only. They're doing it to support the concept and to promote the idea that this House is dysfunctional and that nothing can get done, because they benefit off and they see opportunity come from making things seem totally chaotic. Geez, where have we witnessed that lately, Mr. Speaker? in the south of the border. You know, that seems to be what happens a lot there. So Conservatives have just jumped on board and said, well, this is how we're going to deal with things too. We're going to make things seem completely out of order. It's the only way to advance any of our personal political objectives. And that's where we end up. So the reason why it's important for folks at home to know this, Mr. Speaker, is because we have an order paper. We have an order paper every day that projects the business of the House of Commons. So this is public. You can find this on the website. There's a printed copy every day. And just so folks at home know what we would have been debating and discussing had Conservatives not chosen to continue this filibuster on and on and on, and then bring forward concurrence motions like the one that we have today, here are some of the things that are on the order paper. Next up to be debated, the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, an act to amend the Citizenship Act 2024.
So at this point, Mark Gerretsen is like, well, we could get all this other stuff done. Yeah, all the stuff you want to get done, like the Bill C-63 censorship bill that nobody in the House wants to get done. So there's a whole bunch of other things that he goes through and he whines and everything like that. But let's get to this next part that he talks about.
These are the issues that the Canadian public should know that we are trying to debate in this House of Commons while the Conservatives talk to each other all the time. While the Conservatives set up these concurrence motions and they, on their motion of privilege, are filibustering. We can't talk in this House of Commons right now, Mr. Speaker, about protecting children from online harm because the Conservatives have chosen in week 5 now to absolutely bring this place to a halt and to not let anything proceed. Now, I put 90% of the blame on Conservatives. And then I'll assign 5% both to the Bloc and the NDP. Because the Bloc and the NDP know that there is a way through this. The Bloc and the NDP know that there is a way through this. If either the Bloc or the NDP would come to realize 10%, the Bloc wants 10%, they can have the full 10 then. The Bloc needs to understand, and I know that they do, that if they chose to end this filibustering, they have the power to do it. In a minority parliament like this, we obviously can't do it alone. But the Bloc, or the NDP for that matter, could choose to say, enough is enough. We've now let this go on for 5 weeks. We've given them their opportunity to do it. We've allowed them to run their course, and they have responded in the way that they have, but now it's time to get down to business like adults. Problem is, neither the Bloc or the NDP have chosen to go that route. But I want them both to know that the door is still open. That door won't close. And if there is an interest, I would encourage their House Leader to contact our House Leader so that we could have that discussion about actually moving things forward for Canadians.
You know what would also move things forward for Canadians? Is if you guys surrendered that report to the RCMP. That's the only reason any of this is happening.
The groveling at the end, I think, just shows you the state of the Liberal Party right now.
Well, they're so desperate. They want this to stop, but they don't want to do it properly by giving the report to the RCMP as they have been ordered by their own speaker. They don't want to prorogue Parliament. They don't want to dissolve Parliament. So this is what they get.
Right. And the NDP and the Bloc have said, sucks to be you, buddy. Too bad, so sad. And they kind of even say it. Check it out.
Questions and comments? Qu'est-ce qu'il y a commentaire?
The Honourable Member for Jonquière. I'd like to thank him sincerely for his speech because it makes me realize today of all the evil we've done to the government, the poor victim of a government that is really overwhelmed by this Conservative filibuster supported by us and the NDP that is paralyzing this House, the government that is such a victim, and I feel very bad for this. So I'd like to offer my full recognition to my colleague, and I could also provide him moral support too. Maybe he could see me, and we could talk about this after the question period. So I offer him my full, sincere support.
See you.
It's continued filibustering. I love it.
Now, we actually went to Hansard for this, and so one thing that he actually said that didn't come through in the interpretation is perhaps he can come see me. Maybe we can hug after question period. The sarcasm that was just dripping from that Bloc MP was just phenomenal. And hey, the NDP weren't going to be outdone by that.
Now, I do want to say sometimes they will change things in Hansard, sometimes to make more sense or take out some of the ums or the ahs, or maybe there was a mistake made, such as a date. But in this case, they don't add things. So they wouldn't have added that Mario had suggested to Gerretsen that he can go to him for a hug after.
Hug it out, brah. Anyway, let's see what the NDP had to say right after that.
Well, the melodrama's a little over the top there, Mr. Speaker. He doesn't have to apologize to me. He doesn't have to speak to me. He doesn't have to reach out to me. We don't have to sit down and talk about it. All he needs to do is vote in favor of putting an end to this. So I don't need the outreach by the member. I don't need the sympathy. I don't need any of that. All I need is for the Bloc to start acting like adults and actually let us get down to the business that this House and the people elected us to be here should be doing.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for London Fanshawe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I think I too would like to join with my Bloc colleague to offer my sincerest apologies. I was looking for my tiny little violin, but I'm not allowed props, so I thought maybe I couldn't use it, unfortunately.
Oh my gosh. I'm not allowed props. It's true. They're not allowed props. Sassy, I love it.
But the other interesting thing is that the Bloc actually did kind of reveal that there's actually backroom conversations like we thought there would be, but that the NDP are involved in this now.
It seems like it. I mean, they are also calling concurrence motions. So if they were with the government and trying to get the government functioning again, A, they could vote with the Liberals to shut down the questions of privilege that is currently going on, and that's what's seizing the House. Or B, they could not be putting in these concurrence motions.
Well, and if you heard what Mario said, he said the Conservative filibustering supported by the Bloc and the NDP. So there's definitely cooperation going on in the background. No, make no mistake, these parties are by no means friendly with each other.
No, but I think they all see a common goal, which is to get the Liberals out of government and hopefully pick up a few extra seats for them while they're at it. Because I think it's possible the Bloc and the NDP could be fighting for official opposition. So you have the Conservatives who are a shoo-in for the government, unless they do something absolutely horrid, which I don't think they will. But they're going to be government, and I don't think the Liberals will be in the running for official opposition. I think the Bloc's got a really good shot, and unless the NDP turns around and continues supporting the Liberals, then I think they might have a good shot too.
Well, it all depends, because they continue to just expel verbal diarrhea at every opportunity when they're in front of a camera. Like you have Jagmeet saying, "Oh, we're not going to be supporting anybody," and then it actually comes out that they are supporting them. So he's talking out of both sides of his mouth again, and that will be the death of the NDP if they're not careful. Jagmeet is actually the NDP's worst enemy right now. So it's all going to depend on what happens. The NDP, no doubt, are raising money like crazy right now to try and get some more funds, and Jagmeet's trying to get that much closer to his pension.
Well, the NDP and the Bloc, they know that they're not going to be the government. I mean, Jagmeet thinks he's going to be prime minister, but that's just a different story.
Misinformation, folks. Watch our other video.
Right. But I think they know the best they can hope for is to pick up more seats than they currently have. And they're going to be doing that by picking at the Liberal carcass.